entitled Addressing the Wicked Problem of Water Resource Management, and I used to have it entitled Canterbury Rivers, but I changed it to an ecosystem services approach. My name is Ed Hearnshaw. I've also done this work with my colleagues Jean Tompkins and Ross Cullen at Lincoln University. In Canterbury, especially Canterbury, which is a province in the South Island of New Zealand, we have increasing water demand. It's for irrigation purposes. There's a large area of flat land that can be used for agriculture. There is a lot of water available. It is not from rainfall. The availability of water is from the many rivers that we have running through from the Southern Alps down through the plains. Problem is the water is scarce. A lot of the water has reached its maximum allocation limits while sustaining aquatic health in terms of acceptable minimum river flows. So the solution, the obvious solution, is to build a dam, and we can solve the whole problem with water, and we can get on with our lives, and everyone's happy. But is that the case? Is this a sustainable solution? Of course, there is gains. There's gains to farmers, because then they can go about the irrigation, and they can potentially save the rivers in terms of the minimum river flows. But of course, there's also losses. Losses to in-stream values that are particularly important to conservationists, to recreationists, and to the public in general. So we have this sort of problem between gains and losses in terms of water storage, and we also have disputes amongst the recreationists and the farmers, disputes between even the conservationists and the recreationists. There's disputes everywhere amongst a whole myriad of stakeholders involved with water allocation and water storage. So this is the problem. What we need, of course, as we're all economists, or most of us are economists, is looking for a systematic assessment. And so what I'm arguing is a possible way to do a systematic assessment that really starts to look at how to bring stakeholders together in a sort of a stakeholder analysis, recognising that we've all got different values, different perspectives, trying to integrate it into a framework and ask the question, is this solution sustainable? Is a large water storage project, I haven't really looked at on-farm storage, but potentially that could be, but what I'm really looking at is large water storage projects such as dams, artificial reservoirs, large channels such as leading to river diversions, etc. Those sort of projects, are they sustainable long-term? Are they sustainable, and are they providing values across multiple stakeholders? What are the gains and losses? I take an ecosystem services approach because I believe, thus it's got its problems. It really starts to capture the idea that rivers or ecosystems in general provide multiple values, not just targeting singular values or really constraining the problem to a few values that we like to focus our attention on, really trying to focus on the 17 attributes or values that are generally considered. At least there could be more. Some people like to focus on the Millennium Assessment. I have done myself. It has its problems, and there is a debate in the literature at the moment about the appropriate classification of ecosystem services. Though at the moment, in terms of a practical tool, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment classification is, I think, the most viable. At least 3 of the classes. The supporting ecosystem services are a little bit less, a bit more debatable about whether they are actually a good or a service that provides reasonably direct human benefit for human well-being. But the thing is with ecosystem services, to really get to the heart of their production, is to recognise the complex interactions between abiotic and biotic factors. Now, if we don't really take into account of that, we're taking away the complexity of the problem. This is one aspect of why water resource management, in particular, but generally speaking, ecosystem management, but particularly water resource management, as it's a public resource, is a wicked problem. Now here we have, if we really sort of simplified this wicked problem, which is something that I believe we shouldn't overly do, we can see that we have this sort of production house of these abiotic and biotic factors that produce these ecosystem services that provide human well-being, and then we can go about water resource management, water storage for agriculture, and then we manipulate these ecological processes and so on and so forth. So we have all these interactions, and then we also have the environment interacting as well. That should be, in my opinion, a base model in which to go about systematic assessment. So, Bob Frame from Landcare Research in Lincoln or Christchurch has argued, I think reasonably well, that managing water resources, particularly from river systems, in Canterbury is a wicked problem. A wicked problem is not just about complexity. A wicked problem has a twofold level of complexity involved. It is complex from the stakeholders. We're all debating the issues. What perspective should we use? There's arguments on multiple sides, not just one or two stakeholders, from at least 6 or 7, all with their own perspectives on how the problem should be set. There's obviously also the complexity in terms of the biophysical nature of the system itself, and even more so, not only is it incomplete or uncertain information, but there's actually contradictory information, even from scientists, about where is the production of these ecosystem services. So there's a large level of debate, both biophysical debate and a sort of an economic debate amongst stakeholders and scientists. So the key thing when recognising this is recognising the debate. Having a systematic assessment tool that aids integration from scientists and stakeholders while not oversimplifying the problem, because ultimately these oversimplifications will lead to unsustainable solutions. My belief, it's interesting the font's changed, my belief is that we should focus more on a post-normal science approach. This is an idea come out in 1993 by an economist called Edward. And he says that we should move away from the idea of this sort of objective idea of science, which is value-free, and accept that when our investment stakes are high, we have to make decisions on water storage now. We do not have the credible amount of information, but we have to make the decision anyway. But we have to accept that the uncertainties in terms of the information, and therefore go away from a value-free objectivity, and it's genuinely recognise that we're focusing on perspective. And therefore we should take into account of multiple perspectives, and when we start developing the problem framework in which to develop. So the appropriate framework should genuinely accept this sort of multiple perspective approach, and then try and integrate them together to try and find a common factual perspective in which we can then start leading towards what would be integrated water resource management.